Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting for the Carpinteria Valley Water District to order. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The roll call, please, Lisa.
Director O'Connor?
Here.
Director Holcomb?
Here.
Director Balch?
Here.
Director Roberts is absent, and Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
4 present.
Item number 3, public forum. Any person may address the board of directors on any matter within its jurisdiction, which is not on the agenda. Nada, okay. Then we got number 4, consent agenda. We got 2 items. 4A, are there any questions or comments on 4A? How about any questions or comments on 4B? Then I'd like a motion, please.
Holly motions to approve the
Second.
consent agenda.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director O'Connor?
Aye.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Roberts is absent. Director Van Wingerden?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Item number 5, unfinished business, none. Item number 6, we adjourn to the regular board meeting of the Carpinteria Groundwater Sustainability Agency. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Item number 2, public forum. Any person may address the board of directors on any matter within its jurisdiction which is not on the agenda. Anybody wants to speak? I'd be disappointed if Scott didn't want to speak, so.
We'll make it official, but he wants to speak right now.
Right now? You want to speak now? Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Good evening, Scott Vanderkar. I have just a couple things I wanted to touch on. I attended a San Ynez groundwater meeting. They're a little behind where we are on things. I believe that basin is not determined to be overdrafted and in the same situation as ours. I don't know if it's better or not, but as far as in the eyes of the state. But they are getting going on what we've been talking about. And I did send some information to Bob that one thing that they put up was a chart comparing themselves, their budget, to other groundwater agency districts. Did not include Carpinteria, but a wide range, all the way from what they call the East area, Eastern Management Area, which is the meeting I was attending, with a budget in the $500,000 range, and all the way up to Paso Robles, which has a lot more problems than we have or they have, with over $1 million budget for their, significantly more than $1 million. I don't have those numbers right in front of me. The other item I wanted to just mention is the appeals process. And just as an example of really the case in point is how important metering will be for the landowners and for the private well owners. I did some calculations. My 2 wells I have meters on, as you know. I have over 6 months of information, 6 months of dry period. I put them on in July, one in July, one very beginning of August. So I took that data and combined it with some of my estimates and guesstimates. And what I came out to find is and not surprisingly so, one well, which provides water to a southwest facing direction, has a lot of sun exposure, different soil, different tree planting, etc. But in that case, it just with my estimates, it looked as though I was undercharged by the groundwater agency about $500. However, on the other well, with the same process, it looked as though I was overcharged about $500. So I decided to just call it good and not appeal anything. But my point really to tell you is there is significant difference out there. The one orchard is more of a north-facing, and the other one is a south-facing, and just different soils, different lot of things. So that metering idea is really, really important. And the other thing I did want to mention is there still is question, concern, and a certain amount of just lack of knowledge by landowners, some not even knowing that they've been receiving the charge on their property tax bills, some being charged for groundwater when they don't have a well, and having to provide that information through the appeal process. That, and I think you're all familiar with it, but when it comes to us as landowners, it says, we have this many acres should use this much water, and this much water came through your meter, so the rest of it must have come from the ground. And in some cases, it's saying a significant amount came from the groundwater, yet that landowner doesn't have a well. If they're not paying attention, they pay it and don't know the better of it. And sometimes they do notice it, but, after the fact. Last thing I wanted to say is, interestingly enough, in that year that the appeal process was involved with, was 22-23. Am I right on that? The time period that that latest appeal process involved was the year 22-23. And on my ranch, I received 33.1 inches of rain that year in a 4-month period. Well, just a point of interest is that's over 2.5 acre feet. If that were spread over 12 months, that would be plenty for the year and we wouldn't have to, put any on, but that's not the case. It came in 4 months. So it became apparent to me how important it is to recognize how much rain over what time period, how much at any one time period. It's complicated, and every year's different. And that is why the numbers change year to year in how much the crops use. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Any comments? We're down to the consent agenda, item 3. Any questions or comments on 3A, the minutes of the regular meeting of the board held on February 26, 2025? Any questions or comments on 3B, disbursement report for February 11, 2025, March 10, 2025? If there's no questions, can we have a motion, please?
Polly makes a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? The roll call, please.
Director O'Connor?
Aye.
Director Holcomb?
Yes.
Director Balch?
Aye.
Director Roberts is absent, and Director Van Wingerden.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Item number 4, unfinished business, none. Item number 5, new business. 5A, consider appointment of General Counsel Junijoy Frianeza of Myers, Withers, Gibson, Jones, and Feingold, LLP, and alternate Steve Lee for action. Bob?
Yeah, I think maybe most of you are aware of previous General Counsel Carrie Ann Potts, who went out on leave last, I think it was in the fall of 2024, with the intent of coming back. And she has decided to step away for a longer period. So at this point, it doesn't make sense to have her as general counsel. In the organization that we did in January, we appointed her as general counsel. And so at this point, it seems appropriate to appoint Juna Joy as general counsel and move forward until something changes.
Glad to have you. Can we have a motion?
I have a couple questions, I guess. As we only appoint effectively 2 people from the board, I was a little surprised, I guess, not to get any kind of info on her expected duration of absence, or kind of what the firm's thoughts were on the process. And this is more to my lack of understanding and knowledge around the laws, especially with the complex cases that we deal with and Brown Act and all that kind of stuff. I see that, I'm sorry, Miss Frenez? Frenez. You're a junior associate there, or second year associate?
That's correct. And so the alternate, Steve Lee, he'll be the partner that is overseeing my work. But just for purposes of me attending the board meetings regularly, decided to appoint myself as lead general counsel, and he'll serve as alternate.
Okay. So, yeah, this is, again, a reflection of my thoughts on the process or my insecurities around the law on it. And I think that it's a pretty big transition. Ms. Potts had been at it for a long time. She was a great counsel, and I'm sure you will be too. It does make me nervous that it's a newer associate at the firm and into this field makes me nervous.
Yeah, I'll just say we were surprised when she took a short-term leave. It was a personal matter and took a short-term leave of absence, but understood, and were as well surprised when she decided to make it a long-term. So we really weren't able to plan for it. It was one of those things that came up pretty quickly, and she was gone. And you know, we did talk with the partner, Stephen Lee, to make sure that we'd have continuity between Carrie Ann. There's still communication between her and the office. So questions that have come up, there's still communication about that. In terms of your comfort with a junior associate, there will be a period in which we're sort of evaluating and breaking in and trying to figure out if this is working. So this is it's not set in stone. If we decide we want to go in a different direction, we can.
Does Stephen have the time to be the alternate?
Yes, he
Okay,
does.
okay.
And I'll just add one last comment. My not having the background of those thoughts, it occurred to me that a 1-year contract seemed to be sort of short term, and the relationship appears to be a longer term relationship with the firm. So should we be going longer than a year, in the terms of the agreement?
We can. I would suggest we do a year and then and evaluate at
Under
the
the-
end of the year and then extend it for.
I would
a
agree
longer-
based on the other feedback, so.
All right.
I'm comfortable. I don't know you very well at all. I know you've been filling in. Stephen Lee has a lot of experience with our group, and the only reason I asked about how busy he was is that I know when Carrie Ann came on board, we all kind of assumed we would be getting Stephen, but he was busy at the time. So with Stephen still involved, great.
He's still as available as
Yeah.
as I am.
Yeah, so I'm good.
Good question. So do we have a motion?
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm done.
Okay,
Polly makes a motion to approve the new legal counsel for a year.
Second.
we're going to motion in a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director O'Connor,
Aye.
Director Holcomb,
Yes.
Director Balch,
Nay?
Director Roberts is absent, and Director Van Wingerden.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 3-1-1.
Then we got item number 5B, consider approval of the DWR of Groundwater Sustainability Plan for action. Bob?
Thank you. Yeah, so we got, just kind of in review, the groundwater sustainability plan. We submitted it to Department of Water Resources in February of 2024 for review. On February of 27 of this year, DWR approved the plan with recommendations. And so the plan is set up, or the law is set up such that the plan is reviewed every 5 years. So since we submitted it in 2024, we will have to review it in 2029 again and update as necessary. And so those recommendations that DWR supplied or provided will be incorporated in the updated version of the plan in 2029. There were 5 recommendations primarily of the plan, and the recommendations weren't, I guess, very explicit or very clear, but the gist of them I put on this bullet list, and there's actually 6 shown here because there was a general recommendation that kind of applied to all of the sustainable management criterias. So recommendation 1 was to better define chronic lowering of groundwater sustainable management criteria, including specific impacts of undesirable results on all beneficial users. And so I believe that DWR in this recommendation is pointing out that our approach to defining these SMCs didn't look at specific impacts. In other words, we looked at lowering of groundwater levels. We looked at the existing conditions in a fixed point in time, and I think it was 2016 where the lowest water levels occurred. And then we looked across to see if there were any dry wells that were reported. Didn't have any, so we concluded that, okay, well, in the lowest condition, there were no dry wells, and so therefore there were no undesirable results. So let's set that low point as the basin, what we call the minimum, or the minimum threshold, meaning don't go below that level of pumping. I think they wanted to know a more comprehensive, or they wanted to see a more comprehensive review of what would happen if you did go below that level. How many wells would be dry? What would be the outcome? And so that wasn't done. We just simply said we know that the level doesn't have undesirable outcomes at that level. Well, I think what they want to do is they want to have us look further and try to determine whether there would be just one well or 50 wells or 100 wells dry. So that's what that comment's about. Second comment was better define seawater intrusion SMCs, including quantitative results and specific impacts for undesirable results to all beneficial users. Same thing for seawater. So they want us to know, or they want us to look at what point with seawater moving in are you going to see issues, and what will be the issues. And we didn't go into that. We simply said we don't want the concentration of seawater at these particular wells to get above a certain level, and that was our minimum threshold. And that's not enough for them. They want us, similar to the first one, they want to know what are the impacts. Those are relatively straightforward to describe, and so we will do that in the update. Water quality, SMC for changes in water quality. We, not just management-related changes, that we approach the whole GSP with the mindset of things that are out of our control as a groundwater management basin really should not be in this plan because we can't do anything about them. So, you know, if there's some geology that just lends itself to some water quality problem. So you have, let's say you have a certain type of geology that has very high arsenic, for example. There's really nothing you can do about that. And so we chose to not include that in the plan as a sustainable management criteria. And by doing that, we, said we don't need to manage those types of situations. DWR disagrees. They're saying we need to at least identify them and put them in the plan, even if we can't manage them, which we'll do. Again, on that same comment 3, they want us to better define the water quality SMCs, including quantitative. So this is a theme kind of going through all of the different SMCs. You may recall, Patrick, sorry, Director O'Connor, you may recall that in the GSP, there are 6 sustainability indicators. The ones we focused on were seawater intrusion because we're a coastal basin, chronic lowering of groundwater. There's also subsidence. We didn't focus on that one. There's water quality. We didn't focus on that one. There's chronic depletion of groundwater, which is kind of tied to water levels, lowering water levels. And then there's GDEs, which is groundwater dependent ecosystems. So we looked at all 6 of those, and the theme across all of them is better define these to include all the impacts that would happen if you started exceeding the minimum thresholds. Then number 4, revise the criteria used to define when and where effects of the groundwater conditions cause undesirable results for each applicable sustainability. That's again kind of the same thing. The criteria shall be based on a quantitative description of the combination of a minimum threshold exceedances that cause significant undesirable or unreasonable effects in the basin. And so what they're saying here is, okay, you looked at each one of these sustainable management criteria individually, and you've kind of evaluated them. Now put them together and see what the combined exceedances of these minimum thresholds would be. Again, we can do that in the upcoming plan update. Comment number 5 was defines subsidence SMC measurable objective to reflect the intent to manage the basin to avoid groundwater-related subsidence. Subsidence was one of those SMCs that we really didn't put a lot of effort into because DWR has a satellite, they call it INSAR satellite, and it measures subsidence. We looked at the readings in Carpinteria, and there was virtually no subsidence. And so we simply stated there appears to be no subsidence in Carpinteria, even at the lowest elevation or lowest storage volume. And then that was it. And I think they want us to actually state in there that we will continue to look at it and will manage the basin so that if it is if it is related to groundwater depletion, we'll do something about it. Along those same lines, instead of using the INSAR, they're suggesting that we develop a monitoring network, which means put some points out across the basin, measure them now, and then continue to measure them moving forward in time and looking at whether or not there's some settlement happening. So those are the remarks. Relatively straightforward, not hard to update the plan. So all in all, I think it was a good plan, and they reviewed it in a year, which was good. Not a lot of comments, so we're very happy.
First of all, Scott was involved in this whole process, and we were a little worried because I think we knew that there was data missing, and there wasn't a lot to put together. And so when I got this packet, I couldn't believe they approved it. So when I read what the recommendations were, I wasn't too surprised, to your point too, but I was still surprised that they approved us the first time, knowing that these things were, that we still had some work to do. So I think that's just fantastic news. Congratulations. But where I couldn't, when I went around and around was, when are these recommendations due? Now, I heard you say in the next 5-year one, so 2029. But what I read here, and I kept going over it, was as soon as possible. So I just didn't know, when do they want to see some movement on those 5 things, just so we're staying current? Is it really at the 2029 plan, or do they want something
I
interim?
think the intent of these, they want to see if it's management action that can be done to start working on that. So you mentioned data gaps. It's not one of the recommendations, but they mentioned it in the write-up as a concern. And they would like us to continue to close those data gaps, which we will be doing. So we won't wait till 29.
Okay.
We'll continue to work on those data gaps and try to close
So there's
those.
ways that we'll be showing them that we're making progress even
Yeah,
before
so
it's-
the annual report, which is actually coming up here, we have to submit it in a couple of days. So annual report, every year we have to submit a report to the Department of Water Resources that talks about what we've been doing during the year.
Great, thank you. I'm thrilled, thanks.
Yeah, I would agree. Outstanding result. For me, this package is a real gem of learning, so I found the GSP and the report, rich with information to sort of train yourself on what the basin's all about. What I was looking for, and correct me if I'm wrong, this may be terribly naive, but I was looking for a very simple statement of the condition of the groundwater, over time leading up to now. And the best thing I could find, and it might as well refer to the report because that's what's in the package, but it's in the plan, obviously. But on page 13, there's a couple of comments that talks about the GSP calculates the change in storage, between 2012 and 2020, which is really the sort of baseline period, I think, which reflects current conditions, showing an average annual decline of 3,300 acre feet per year. And then in the next paragraph, it leads itself to saying that the GSP estimates that the sustainable yield for the basin is 3,600 to 4,000 acre feet per year. So my question is, I don't quite understand the nature of those two. Are we, so to speak, just keeping our head above water?
No.
Or
So meaning we're 3,300 acre feet per year over the sustainable yield. So the sustainable yield is 3,800 per year. We took 6,900 per year for that period. And that largely was due to the drought. Let me back up. I don't want to say we took the lack of recharge combined with the elevated pumping led to a depletion in the basin over the period. So, but it's important to not look at just that period.
Right.
Because, the way groundwater basins work is they fill up over time and then, in shorter periods get drawn down. And so in this case, the intensity of that drought during 2013 to 2017 or 2019 was such that it caused a lot of depletion of stored groundwater.
it's helpful. It seems like that was a very simple idea that was buried pretty deep in.
Yeah, and in the GSP, there is it's chapter 3, and it's in the sustainable yield section, but there's a long-term water budget, so it looks at when water was going in and when water was going out, and whether it was filling or depleting, and that's probably the best graphic to answer your question.
Yeah, it'll be helpful. I didn't get all the way through the actual plan. I spent more time on the report, but anyway, that's helpful, very helpful. Thank you.
Casey, any comments? No, I'm good. So we need a motion for this?
No, there's no action. This is just for information.
Okay. Then we got number 6, Executive Director Report. Norma?
Yes. Okay, through January, the CGSA has received 90% of the direct charges that were assessed, and our expenditures are at about 38%. So below the 58% through January 31st. The next due date is April 10th, so we should get the remaining funds after that date and prior to June.
Any questions? And then we are adjourned, and then we reconvene the regular district board meeting. New business, item number 8. Number 8A, consider water supply impact fee for information and presentation by Mesa.
Yeah, so this is back. We've been talking about this for a few meetings, and we're ready to. We've come to, I guess, a point in our analysis and have some discussion. So with that, I'll have Mesa do a presentation.
Hello, everyone. So as Bob mentioned, this is, I think, the third meeting where we're talking about the impact fee. So if you'll go to the first slide with the agenda. So we initially talked about the motivation for the impact fee and then some of the details of how it would work. And so now we're going to get a little bit more into some draft numbers and what the impacts could look like. But first I want to talk about the schedule so you understand the next steps and how this fits into that. We'll also talk a little bit about how we're getting to these draft numbers and what the basis could be for the fee that we're looking at. And then I have a couple of example projects just to sort of give you some reference points in terms of what the different magnitude of impact might be for different types of projects. So if you go to the first slide or second slide. So we have had 2 meetings on this previously. I think it was January and February, and this is the third meeting, March, on the impact. And so this coincides with the public comment period. We sent out a insert with customer bills, a 1-page description with some basic information about the impact fee and a link to a comment form online, which is on our website, along with some information about the impact fee. We've also been posting regularly on social media, alerting people to the fact that this comment period is open right now, and also that they could come to a board meeting and make comments if they would like to. And so we're hoping that we will receive some public comments. We also specifically sent out an email to a couple of development contacts that engineering has, since they are probably the audience that is most interested in this information. So in April, the public comment period closes at the beginning of April. If there are comments to discuss or comments that influence how we want to go about this impact fee, we will discuss them then. And then as a result, we'll put together the final numbers as well as the documents. There'll be an ordinance and then a short report that we would need to adopt for this. However, if there aren't a lot of public comments to consider, or possibly none, we could just move up this timeline too. So I think it would be June, July at the latest when we would be asking for adoption on this. It could possibly be sooner, of course, as we look at the numbers and talk about the details of the basis for the fee, which we'll get into today. If you have concerns, we can always add additional meetings, but that's the timeline we're envisioning right now. Next slide. So At my previous meetings, we mentioned that CAP could be the basis for this fee in terms of figuring out what the dollar per acre foot would be, because remember what we're talking about is if there is a project that is significantly intensifying the water use of a parcel, we take the acre feet of intensification, which we calculate based on the project description and their allocation baseline, and then we say, what are we going to charge them for that? So we need to know the dollar per acre foot amount that we would charge them for each acre foot of intensification. So CAP could be the basis for that. We talked about water management strategies being the alternative basis, which was obviously not well defined. And to have a fee, we need to define these specifically so that we have a clear nexus between the fee and the water that's being provided and who's benefiting from that water. So what we're doing today is starting to get into the specifics of what these strategies look like. So what we're considering right now, we've been working with a consultant on developing a 50-year water supply strategy. And so we have a couple of scenarios in there. One would be we pursue CAP, another is instead of CAP, we have a local groundwater bank, and another is regional groundwater banking. And so we can use those because they give detailed supply and cost information as the basis for this fee, because then we know how many acre feet we're talking about from each of our different strategies and what the associated costs are. So we start to get to the level of detail that we need to actually have a fee. And so if you go to the next slide, so what we're going to look at today and what we're proposing right now is that we would take the results of the CAP strategy and the local groundwater banking strategy and the dollar per acre foot number that they come up with and use the average of the two. And that would be because currently they're pretty close numbers, and that would allow us to essentially have some flexibility in how we actually go about the fee. We're proposing at this point not to consider the regional groundwater banking strategy, and at a meeting in April, we're going to have very detailed results on these models where we'll go into these three strategies in a lot more detail and talk about all the assumptions behind them and what the results look like. So keep in mind, we're not doing that today, but today we are using them to sort of inform this other discussion. So at the next meeting, we'll get into why we're not considering the regional banking strategy today. So if you go to the next slide, so this model that we have gives us our water supply portfolio, depending which strategy we use, each year, and then we can look at it over the 50-year total as well. And it gives us the associated cost with that. So what's helpful here is that we can use that entire portfolio to consider the basis for this cost rather than just the one strategy that sort of is the marginal water use, that it's currently the gap in demand, between demand and supply. So what we've been talking about before was sort of basing the dollar per acre foot number on just CAP or just some other water supply strategy. And here we're saying, why don't instead we base it on the whole portfolio? So the amount of CAP water that we use in combination with the amount from all the other supplies. And that seems like a valid approach because the CAP water that we use then offsets water from other supplies, right? So we're not using the CAP water in a vacuum. Same thing with a local groundwater bank. We're only using that as a certain portion that we need in addition to other supplies. And if we look at the results of this, the dollar per acre foot is actually lower when we consider the entire supply rather than if we just based it on CAP or just based it on the local groundwater option. So, did you have a question? Yeah, go ahead. So the dark gray, I think, yeah. Well, it should be, yeah, so it should be groundwater, it should be Kachuma Spill, Kachuma ID1, State Water Project CAP. I think it's the local groundwater banking's the purple and the CAP are the purple. Oh, you're probably right. Yeah, it probably is supplemental water. I think I had deleted it because I didn't want to confound this with the idea of additional supplemental water purchases on top of that, but it looks like it didn't delete from that one graph. So ignore that for now, I would say. So yes, so if we,
Can I ask you?
Yeah,
So is
sure.
the dark purple or is the purple on both?
purple on one is CAP, purple on the other is local groundwater.
So CAP has no local groundwater banking?
That's correct.
associated?
They're alternatives.
Okay, so it's one or the other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, and the reason that they're both purple there is to show that they are the sort of new addition to our supply strategy, which we're considering. So it would be one CAP or local groundwater. Those are the two. So if you go to the next slide, I think I said everything I wanted for that. So these are draft numbers because we are still finalizing our model with the consultant, but what you can see here is that if we take those two strategies, and for now we're saying we're going to take the average between the two because they're pretty close. We have a total cost that we're looking at, a yield. So these are numbers for that entire strategy. Remember, not just CAP, not just State Water Project water, but our entire annual strategy, essentially. And we come up with a $1 per acre foot water supply impact fee. And this fee, I don't know if you remember what we've shown as reference points in the past from Goleta and Ventura, but this is about an order of magnitude less. Those fees tend to be about 10 times more.
And these are annualized numbers.
Well, so this would be, I sort of get to that on the next slide, but you pay this at the point where you're getting new meters, right? Because this is a project which qualifies for the intensification calculation. So it's only a project that's getting new meters that is significantly intensifying or changing the land use. So they pay this fee at the time they get meters. So it's a point in time where you pay for the acre feet times this fee. The fee amount changes over time, and I'll get to some details of that on the next slide, but you are always paying for essentially what the fee is today, and then you're sort of buy into the system the same way we do with the capital cost recovery fee, where you sort of have to make up what you haven't contributed but other users have, but you're not paying for the future because that will be covered in water bills or the tax roll or whatever other strategy we decide.
So is this the CAP?
No,
proposal,
so
or
this is the average between the two.
the blend.
Yes, this is the blend. Because remember, we don't have final numbers there yet, so I don't want to give you exact numbers for one strategy and then we get too attached
Sure.
to them.
So,
But yeah.
yeah, I mean, this isn't anywhere near the CAP cost, not even.
Well, that's the
Ballpark.
thing, is it would be higher if it were just CAP, but because it's essentially we take our entire strategy for the year with groundwater, if we have spill from Kachuma, State Water Project water, CAP, and then that's what we come up with. I think part of the reason that this is lower for us than some of the neighboring agencies is because we're considering taking that portfolio approach. And if you just use the new capital project, it looks much more expensive. And I think it makes sense to take this portfolio approach because that capital project isn't used in isolation.
Yeah, you can, just to add a little bit of further description, you can think of that 1,100 acre feet as including some of the avoided costs that you get when you go with a project like CAP, for example, supplemental water purchases or bringing in more state water. Those things cost. So if you were to compare a do nothing project versus the CAP, you would say, okay, the CAP will help you avoid more state water, will help you avoid buying supplemental water. And when you add that all together, you divide your, total annual supply by the total cost. That's what that number is representing.
But isn't CAP the most expensive water of those options?
So what is not easily grasped is that CAP causes more reliability
Right.
and reduces the risk of having to buy more expensive water over the 50-year period.
So you're envisioning a time where purchasing water would be more expensive than CAP's operation.
Purchasing and delivering, and then also purchasing and delivering more state water over time, all adds up to more money than it doesn't add up to more money. It solves a problem, and the groundwater banking, which we're comparing it to, the local groundwater bank, does a similar thing. It's a little bit, at least according to the model right now, it's a little bit cheaper, but it doesn't solve the problem wholly that we're trying to solve. So.
Right.
I think it'll become clearer when we show the results of the model in April. And so that'll happen in April, which is before there will need to be decisions on CAP or on the impact fee or the methodology for recovering CAP costs. So you'll have a lot more insight into those scenarios. Okay, next slide. So what we have, and the way we would look at this for the impact fee is we have an understanding of what our total 50-year portfolio looks like, but then we also have annualized numbers. And so in those, we consider things like increases in costs over time, but then also we discount money too, so we can consider it in today's dollars. And then same way as for the capital cost recovery fee, we also have to think about the fact that these assets depreciate over time. So I didn't want to give, again, specific numbers here because those line item numbers were very close to finalizing, but they're not quite finalized yet. But essentially, we could look in our model at any particular year. So if someone joins today or 5 years from now, if they're buying into the system with this impact fee, we'd be able to calculate the appropriate dollar per acre foot for them. And based on what we see with the capital cost recovery fee, that tends to go up a bit over time because you're having to pay into the system for a longer period of time. But that is offset by some of these other factors like depreciation of the asset. You can continue. So I just want to give a couple example projects so you get a sense of a type of project, the acre feet of intensification it could occur, and then what sort of cost it might pay. We're not saying that we are charging these projects that particular amount. So for this, there's a dense housing development proposed for there with 20-ish units. So we've calculated they would have about 4 acre feet of intensification. So their water supply impact fee would be about $4,000. So this doesn't, at least in my opinion, seem like it would likely be a huge burden on that project. If you want to go to the next one. Here, there's a much larger development, housing development proposed. So it would be more like 7.5 acre feet of intensification for $8,000. And then if you go to the last one. I also wanted to give an example of a much smaller project so you could get a sense of what the impact could be for them. And they only have about an acre foot of intensification, so it would be about $1,200. Now, all these numbers are in the context of basically if they bought into the system now at the beginning of this process. Again, if they were buying into the system 10 years from now, those costs would look very different because they'd be paying for 10 years of buy-in, not year 1 of buy-in. So just keep that in mind.
So would it be 10x?
No, not necessarily. It depends on the lifetime of the asset and those other factors.
The
that we
depreciation
have.
speed, but it would go up.
Yeah, I
annually
think
at a decent clip.
we could, the next time we talk about this, we could look at how our capital cost recovery fee has changed over time, and that would probably be a good reference point for this. Yeah. That's it, I think.
Okay, any questions from the board so far?
Bravo.
Good work.
Thank you. Scott, you wanted to speak?
Scott Vanderkar. I'm laughing at myself because I think I'm going to be a bit foolish in what I say. As a customer, this is what I received. And so I assumed that they were connected, that The development fee had something to do with my red line use. And if that were the case, my takeaway was that if I go over my red line in the future, I may get a penalty, and it may have something to do with the impact fees. But then the other thought I had is that if there's more development, then it's going to lower my red line, and I'll have less water to use, and I'll be closer to a penalty. So I'm saying really that this is really confusing, at least to me, and maybe to a lot of other customers. Are they connected, first of all, the graph we're going to be seeing on our bill and the development fees?
Yeah, I'm assuming that what you're holding is the allocation letter, and they are connected in that your allocation is the baseline that we look at when we evaluate whether a project, a housing project or development project, is intensifying the use. So we look at the allocation, which is based on, depending on what type of property. I think in your case it would be based on historic use, and we then evaluate. Okay, if they put 50 houses on Scott's land, that's going to cause the need for more water, and we're going to charge based on that need. So the allocation also serves a second purpose, and that is to inform users about what their allocation is and what they should expect to be using, so that they can see if they start going over, that maybe they need to review how they're using water.
So if everything is status quo with a customer and there is no development, it's a property as is, whether it's agriculture or residential, then this red line, is that calculated on a 5-year average, or what is the basis for establishing that red?
It's similar for ag parcels. It's similar to the way Casitas that did it, and that is a point in time we looked at. I'm not sure. Is it a 5-year? Yeah, it's a 5-year average in a point of time. So it's not a rolling 5-year average. It's whatever.
Okay, what Casitas did was for customers, they used the drought time period, 1989 to 1990, and used that as the allocation base. And then on our bill, we have that allocation, and then what we've used for the year, and then what's remaining. And if we go over that allocation, then there is a penalty, significant penalty. But that's different from what I'm seeing there. So I think the takeaway, and I appreciate you even taking the time to answer my questions on this, but I'm guessing there's a lot of confusion out there, and I am sort of looking forward to when the bills come with this and I can track it better and really make sense of it. Thank you.
Jason?
I think to Mr. Vanderkaar's point, can you go over the triggers on when this fee might apply? What triggers that evaluation?
For the intensification?
Yeah.
I'll let Mesa do that. She's more familiar.
So it is, the specific language is written in the text of the ordinance, and it's two things. You have to be requiring a new meter, and then it's either you're modifying the land use. So, and we use the cities, I forget exactly what the reference point is. There is a specific change in land use language that we use. And it's really like, are you changing the footprint of the existing structure? That I believe triggers it. There's also, are you adding condos or subdividing a parcel? Those are really the triggers that we're looking for. There's also, are you exceeding the currently zoned density? So it's really, are you adding meters plus those things? And it's only those things. So there's a lot of minor modifications to parcels which would not meet that trigger.
Great. So I think to his point, if you're doing your thing and you're not making big changes or adding meters, you're your allocation red line is
Well,
informational?
so we're talking about the intensification. The things that I just mentioned are that one-time intensification fee. So for the allocation, it's based on a historical use period of 5 years. If you're an agricultural customer, there are wet years and dry years in there, and I think a normal year when we have those. And so if you're operating normally, you would hopefully fall within that allocation. You may occasionally exceed that allocation. Occasional exceedances, I don't think are a cause for concern. If you're concerned that you're regularly exceeding your allocation, you can reach out to our conservation person or submit an appeal form, because it's possible we have information for the parcel incorrect. So I'd say if you're regularly exceeding your allocation, those red lines are on the graphs now to contact us.
Thanks.
Patrick?
Just want to make one comment, based on my activity in other land use, interests, is oftentimes the 2003 zoning map is what's referred to as sort of current for Carpinteria and Carpinteria Valley. There's some more than subtle changes to that map occurring to deal with the housing element requirements for the state. And there's a new, shortly going to be updated zoning classification called residential mixed use, which is not residential, it's not commercial, it's not industrial, but it's a set of parcels that were identified as a new zoning classification to address the housing shortages. So I think those are going to be opportunities where intensification comes into play. So just keep that in mind. And it's not yet published, but it's going through the cycle, just like you are. It's going through the cycle of discussion, notification, and so on. But it's pretty close. So more to come.
Thank you, Mesa. Bob, a question. Scott's red line, isn't it also connected to the state, beginning to tell us how much water we can use for a residence or an acre of farmland?
Not farmland, but one of the drivers of having the allocation was for us to understand whether we were going to be able to meet the state's mandated per capita water use. So, there are multiple reasons why having an allocationer is a good idea, because you can determine whether you're going to be overusing or you're going to be exceeding the state's limits. It's information for the user so they can understand kind of where historically they've been, or if it's a residential parcel, what the water demand should be for outside and inside. And in droughts, we hear often when we have to do drought stages and reductions, we often hear people say, I'm already conserving, and so now you're going to ask me to cut back another 10%. And so we can look at allocations and say, your allocation has been this, and it's, in the range of where you are with similar types of uses, where you are, and adjust it based on that, as opposed to just saying everybody has to cut back 10%.
Right, so it's more a fairness issue. Whoever is already responsible now, say, hey, I give them my best shot, and then our red line will show that they are giving it their best shot.
Right.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Go for it, Shirley.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you could hear me because I have no raised hand thing. I had a few questions. The first one is the $1,100 per acre feet one-time payable impact fee. Does that reflect the 40% rate increase across the board that was estimated last time we were talking about the rate structure? Are those two tied together? Does that equal that?
It looks at the entire cost of the water portfolio. So
With the 40%
it does
increase.
include yes. So one of the options includes the cap, which is what you're talking about.
With the cap, it was going to increase. 40%. Across the board. I think is the last.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it's 30%. increases, so 7.5 for 4 years. However, 2% of that each year is just inflation. So, so it's actually more like 22% for cap.
Yeah, that's what people want to know in the next, year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years. How much is my total water bill going to go up? So that's kind of what I was talking about, and I hope that's tied in with that because I know it's not a direct apples to apples, but it has to be what is driving it. And my second question was, how do you define local water banking? I have no idea what that means, really.
It means developing ASR wells in our groundwater basin and capturing spill water and does it include importing state water for storage? Yeah, and I think trying to import state water for storage in the basin,
Oh, in the Carpinteria Basin.
in Carpinteria Basin, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you're looking at that. Anyway, I'm sure it's really hard to compute what that would be. So, okay, thank you. Those were my questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Shirley. Anybody else? Then we move on to item number 8B, consider cap update for information. Bob and also Chris Malaysian is going to make a presentation.
Yeah, so we've been trying to give monthly updates on the CAP project, and so this is the monthly update, and Chris is with us today on Zoom, as opposed to Rob, who I think is usually the presenter, but Chris is going to do it this time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris. Are you with us, Chris? Oh, there you go.
Yes, I am.
Great. I'll control the slide deck.
Yeah, let me know when you can see it. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. So this slide deck is very similar to, I think, the last time Rob presented the general update. So we can go to the next slide. Covers many of the same topics. So we'll review just design status, permitting update, our outreach status, easements, contract coordination, funding and financing, and then upcoming milestones. Next slide. Okay, so for our design status, in February, end of February, February 28th, the design team, Woodard & Curran, submitted their 100% design drawings and specifications for the AWPF design. We're currently reviewing those drawings, back-checking that comments made on the 75% were incorporated satisfactorily into the design, and then generally reviewing for any final issues, constructability issues, conflicts that we may need to address now that will help minimize change orders during construction. We do have a few focused meetings this month and upcoming here in the next week or so, focusing really on controls and integration to ensure that the facility integrates as needed into both the Carpinteria Sanitary District's facilities and their controls stated, and also the districts. For the conveyance pipeline, we received our 75% design back in January. Comments were sent back to them in February, and we're in process of evaluating alternatives, alignments that kind of and explored those alternatives that came out of the comments. And to the extent that there are cost savings, incorporating that revised alignment into the design. And then finally, injection monitoring wells, we're effectively 100% complete and ready to bid those out when the time comes. For our permitting applications, for the coastal development permits, we met with the city planning department on February 28th. following submission of our responses to their original comments, we did receive another incompleteness letter from the city, but the only outstanding item was actually the city signing the CDP application. So that, at this point in time, the direction that we've received is that needs to be done by city council action, and that action is supposed to occur in April. Reason for the city signing the CDP application is because of the Memorial Park monitoring well that is located in Memorial Park, and we're working with, and we'll kind of talk later on here with DDW to attempt to eliminate that monitoring well from the project, as we believe that installing only the 2 new monitoring wells on Linden and Meadowview are needed to meet Title 22 requirements. Otherwise, we're expecting our Planning Commission hearing sometime in July, August timeframe, but hopefully we can speed that up as we're working with the city to accelerate that process. For other permitting efforts, we have submitted effectively all of the technical documents that we intend to submit to both the regional board and DDW at this time. So we completed an anti-degradation analysis and submitted that to regional board on March 13th, and then submitted our ocean discharge analysis to the regional board, different groups, on March 14th. The only remaining item that we must submit or intend to submit here is our Title 22 engineering report before May, or in May. And what that really means is just at this time, before we start in construction and get move more forward with the project. Next slide. For outreach, FM3 has launched their survey in early March. As of kind of end of last week, they had over 200 community members participate in that survey. Our goal is 400 total, and we're hopeful that we reach that goal by the end of this week. So our target is to present summary of that research at the April 23rd board meeting. Otherwise, collateral development is underway. We've got drafts into staff for review, including a draft presentation, bill inserts, community packets, and we intend to begin reaching out to the communities directly who will be most affected by the project, principally sort of the neighborhoods surrounding the Meadowview and Linden injection well sites, since they'll see sort of extended construction for those for the injection and monitoring wells. For easements, good news. Yesterday, we actually received the signed Catholic Church agreement. So now it's on the district to sign and return. There's some strategy that needs to be managed there with regards to that agreement. I think we have 180 days after the agreement is fully executed before it becomes void. And so we just want to make sure that we time the district's signature on that agreement, but otherwise that easement's in place. And then for contractor outreach, we conducted another tour with a prominent contractor who have expressed a lot of interest in CAP. And just generally, you know, we're seeing a lot of positive feedback from contractors, excited for this project. You know, contractors of the caliber that work on projects like CAP, you know, they like to work on good projects too. And, you know, there's general recognition that the goals of this project, the impact and the benefits to the community, the project team, you know, both Bob and Craig with the CSD, really have made it that they've expressed a lot of excitement. So we're hopeful that that desire translates into a very competitive bidding environment. Next slide, our financing update. So we did get some good news, and there's some less than ideal news to present here. So through efforts made by the project team, including Craig with the CSD, who flew to Washington, D.C. to meet with Salute Carbajal, and other efforts to coordinate with those on the legislative bodies in charge with kind of drafting, the budget. We were named on the continuing resolution that passed recently and signed into law. This named CAP as the grant recipient, which was necessary to receive the $8.7 million amendment that we had been notified that we were received or awarded last fall, but we couldn't access those funds until the project was named in a continuing resolution. So that was accomplished, which was great for the projects. Our bad news is that the state flipped again on their water recycling grant. So if we all recall the saga that this has been, originally we received 15 million. That was kind of the original grant total. And then back in early 24, based on the draft governor's budget, they reduced that to 5 million. And then within a few months, the intended use plan for fiscal year 24-25 added back the additional 3 million. So we were led to believe that our grant total for CAP would be 8 million through the states. And most recently, we were notified that they're taking back that 3 million, so keeping us at 5 million, with generally the understanding that because Prop 4 passed, that will likely end up being the source for hopefully our grants kind of make up the grant total that we have, but generally speaking, just recycling water projects. So we're tracking Prop 4 closely, but the end result will be that this board will likely need to make a decision on the project to move forward with construction without any further grant funding at this time. And then last slide, just a general milestone update. So in April, intend to present community survey results, water supply alternatives, the CAP economic analysis, and then we'll have our 100% design pipeline plans. We, at this point in time, still intend to advertise the AWPF construction bid package in May, and then early summer advertise the pipelines and the wells, and then receive all 3 bids, our City Planning Commission hearing, and then operations agreement execution. And that's all I have. So I'll open up to any questions if there are any.
Patrick?
Just one thought as a benchmark, I made a point to sit through the city council's review of the solid waste management fee increase earlier this week. It's 0 customer feedback, not a thing. So I'm not sure it's directly applicable, but there's not the nuance of property owner versus, user, like the context of water is, but there is to some extent. So I just thought it was interesting. They got literally no feedback from their mailer. And it was a 5% increase that just went through.
Anything, Polly? Any comments? Casey? Actually, Scott, you want to speak?
So Scott Vanderkar, and I have to admit, I've known about this project for a long time, but I'm pretty ignorant about the details. And so is it my understanding that there are 3 sites for the injection wells? got Meadowview Memorial Park, I guess, and then St. Joe's?
No, there are two injection wells, so there are two sites, injection wells, but there are additional monitoring wells, which are much smaller and, but the injection well on Meadowview Lane is co-located with a set of monitoring wells. And then, the well on St. Joe's, the injection well on St. Joe's is also co-located with a set of monitoring wells. And then there was a set of monitoring wells that had been previously installed in El Caro Park. And the final wells that we're trying to have eliminated are proposed in Memorial Park.
So are those sites available by public inquiry online? Some kind of a map or something? As I say, I just haven't followed this close enough to even know if there have been public workshops on it.
Yes, so there is a project map. There's a CAP website.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can go to the Water District's website, and there's a CAP button on there, and you can click on it. It'll take you and tell you all about the project.
Great, appreciate that. And if I understand it right, and this comes from a question that was asked of me, there are two benefits. One is augmenting the groundwater, which will add to our supply, and the other, and correct me if I'm wrong, and the other is to fend off saltwater intrusion. Is that fairly accurate?
I don't want to get into a long, protracted conversation in the middle of a board meeting, but if you'll bear with me, I can answer that question, and maybe then we wrap it up.
You want to answer? Or?
Yeah, I can, yes.
Go ahead.
I just don't want to continue on with the
Right, no, I
direct
understand.
conversation. So I think you're conflating the inclusion of the CAP project in the GSP in that it was included as a beneficial project. The project driver is not groundwater sustainability, but it has groundwater sustainability benefits. The project driver is a water supply project. So what Carpinteria Valley Water District is trying to do is secure its water supply for the next 50 years. You know, when we look at the planning horizon at the existing water supplies, we're seeing that water supplies are becoming stressed and likely to start reducing. We have local groundwater, we have Lake Cachuma, we have state water. All three of those supplies are under stress, and as droughts come, which we know they do, that are similar to the one we just had, we expect that now that Sigma's in place, we won't have as much water to draw from the groundwater basin. The historic approach has been, if there's not enough water in Cachuma and state water, turn back to the groundwater basin. Now that there's some constraints on the groundwater basin, we won't do that. We won't be able to do that. What we'll have to do is we'll have to go out into the open market and purchase water. And so what CAP is proposing to do is add a new water supply, a local water supply that will use the groundwater basin for storage purposes. But our intent is we'll put the water in, but we intend to take it back out. But that does have temporal benefits in terms of creating water levels to rise over time. It also has secondary benefits because now that Sigma is around, we'll likely be able to manage it sustainable because we have a new water supply in Carpinteria. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Bob, I got a question. I'm assuming our CAP team is in touch with our representatives in Sacramento to make sure they don't keep taking money away instead of giving us more money.
We spent a lot of time trying to get that $10 million back, and we ended up with $3 million. But in the end, I think that the fact that Prop 4 passed and that there's a budgetary problem in California, the governor decided to take all money back that was allocated at the time of the budget, so.
Right, so at least we're trying, so
Yes.
under the circumstances. Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely, go for it, Shirley.
Yeah, I was getting hopeful because the state, one of the big billion-dollar water projects, the aqueduct starts with an R, Bob. Anyway, it looks like it failed, and there's some other projects along with that aren't going along. So it was a half a $500 million the state got back in grant money that they're not using. So, I just wish I could figure out the ins and outs of how people, can not, I don't think all of the money's been reallocated to other projects, but it's for groundwater banking and it's for, recycling, I think. But Bob is aware of that, but I just wish we could do more about this half $1 billion extra money that came up with the state that I'm sure everyone would like to have more of. But there's opportunities that come up and things change. So I hope we're on it, and I'm sure we are, and everyone's trying their best. But I wanted to make you aware of that. Okay, thank you.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, that's the Vaquero Reservoir Expansion Project, and that's a part of the water storage infrastructure funding program, I think. And we are aware of that, and we have been looking at that as a potential, source of funding. They haven't indicated how they're going to reallocate that money yet, so.
So reaching out to both Monique and Hart would be helpful if we tell them, hey, there's some money there for us.
Yeah, we'll definitely
Okay.
pursue that.
Make sure we do. Okay, thank you. Then we move on. Any more questions? Then we're good. We move on to item number 8C, consider resolution number 116 to establish a new checking account for construction deposits for action. Bob?
Yeah, I'm going to let Norma handle this. I think it's something
All
that,
right.
that was recommended by
Yes.
accounting.
Yeah, so just some background on it. It came about, the district is revamping its investment reporting, which you'll see next month. And as part of that, we reviewed neighboring agencies' investment reports, and we noted that a few of them had separate checking accounts for their customer deposits. So the district, when customers request any service connections, meter installations, or any type of modifications, we require deposits from the customers. And currently, we have those funds in the district's general operating account. As of March 11th, we have about $640,000 worth of deposits. So in speaking with the accounting department, it makes sense for us to have them separate. It would simplify the reconciliation, the tracking, and the processing, not to have those funds mingled in with the just general operating accounts. So we are recommending that we are authorized to establish this account. We did have a comment from Shirley Johnson about including something in the resolution that states that it will be included in the disbursement report, which it would be included in the disbursement report. The only transactions that we expect to see in that account are transfers from that checking account into the district's operating once a project is closed out, or any refunds back to the customer if their deposit exceeds the cost of the project.
I move we adopt resolution 1166.
Holly seconds.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please, Lisa.
Director O'Connor?
Aye. Aye.
Gum?
Yes.
Director Balt?
Aye.
Director Roberts is absent, and Director Van Wingerden.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Item number 8D, consider appointment of General Counsel Juna Joy Frianeza of Myers, Withers, Gibson, Jones, and Feingold, LLP, and alternate Stephen Lee for action. That's Bob, anything else you want to add to that?
Same as as explained in the GSA meeting.
Polly makes a motion to
Second.
support the
We
contract.
got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Director O'Connor,
Aye.
Director Holcomb,
Yes.
Director Balch,
Nay.
Director Roberts is absent, and Director Van Wingerden.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1-1.
Then we got item number 9, director reports. 9A, CCWA Operating Committee meeting, March 13, 2025. Bob?
Yes, I attended this, and there were a couple of interesting items on the agenda. It was a long, actually probably one of the longest operating committee meetings that I've been to. But we talked about the typical things, the water supply outlook, and some of the operational activities. But I think the more interesting thing, or things to me, were a proposal by a housing development that was being proposed in Orcutt, and they essentially were proposing to utilize the coastal branch for wheeling purposes, which is something I've advocated for a long time. We have excess capacity in that facility, including the Polonio Pass water treatment plant. And they proposed to get their own water from wherever they want to get it, and then move it through the coastal branch, including the Polonio Pass, and then pay a wheeling fee to CCWA. I did a little bit of research. It's called the Solomon Hills Project. It's about 4,000 homes, as I said, in Orcutt. And they've completed a agreement with Cadiz, which is a water bank in San Bernardino County. And so I suspect that that's where they'll be working with Cadiz and maybe some other water dealer to get the water and then move it through the CCWA system. So that was just an introduction to that concept. They will come back when they're ready, if they're able to move forward when they're ready. The second presentation that we saw was with San Luis Obispo County, who we are partners on the coastal branch with. When I say we, I mean CCWA and San Luis Obispo County. San Luis Obispo County has a smaller allocation, about 4,000 acre feet compared to our 40,000 acre feet of CCWA, or 40 plus. And one of the things that they're looking at is they have Paso Robles groundwater basin, which is a critically overdrafted groundwater basin under Sigma, and they would like to start a water bank in that basin. And they pitched CCWA utilizing that water basin, or that water bank, to help it manage its water supplies better. And it was a relatively complex idea, but it was somewhat developed. But I think definitely more discussion has to be had. But the idea was to provide banking capability close to the coastal branch and close to CCWA in exchange for some leave behind. And so I think that was kind of the idea, to help manage Paso Robles and start to help it recover, because, as I said, it was a critically overdrafted basin. That was interesting. And then finally, they presented the annual budget, which was also pretty good news in that the costs are expected to decrease slightly from last year. So that's my report.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Then we got item number 9B, Comb Operations Committee meeting, March 20, 2025. Polly?
Thank you. So there were two items on the agenda, and the first one was the infrastructure improvement plan over the next 5 years. This had been reviewed by the member unit technical team. Bob also participated in it. Basically, what we do is take a look at what the Bureau categories are for immediate attentions, Cat 1, which we do not have right now, which is great news. Category 2, potential operations failure. Category 3 would be nice to have an improvement or enhancement. And we came up with a total list of projects at 7.88 million. We have our own internal priorities that go from 1 to 6, meaning 1 being the highest priority, 6 being, if we can get to it, let's see how things go. A lot of these I've already reviewed with you at different meetings, but for instance, 2 of the ones are the Laurel Outlet Works tunnel safety improvements, and also, of course, the North Portal Elevator modification study and implementation. A category 2 this is for Combs scale, is the Lower Reach South Coast Conduit Blow Off AVAR valve replacement. And then there's lots of 3s, Reservoir Bypass, Shadow Road Improvement, Sheffield Tunnel evaluation and repair that I told you about a couple months ago, the North Portal Intake Tower and Gate Chamber seismic assessment, what would happen in an earthquake. So a lot of these have already been on our radar, but basically we approved it, knowing that the engineering teams approved it. Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, there was one that Joel wanted to add, which was the emergency pumping facility, and only because this is going to be a dry year, and so he was getting worried, but the technical team said emergency means emergency, so wait until it's an emergency. So I think he was just being overcautious. So right now, that amount is roughly 7.88 million, again, over 5 years, with some of the partial reading of the projects that I have told you, others you're already familiar with. And the other part, before I go on to the risk and resiliency, is there anything else that, okay. And then the other one was the risk and resiliency assessment, and basically, COMB takes the lead, but we also presented this to the technical team in doing the COMB, what COMB sees for the EPA as its various threats in the infrastructure from the intake tower down to Carpinteria. This could be earthquake, this could be vandalism, it could be rain, debris flow, fire, of course, vandalism, cybersecurity, and basically, we do this every 5 years, and we prepare the report, which is considered sensitive. So I think that's about all I'm going to say on it. Our deadline is to present it, to hand it in March 31st. And then what the member units do is take that as kind of a foundation, even though our list differs. We have our own areas, but so COMB goes first, and then the member units will be doing theirs as well. Is there anything else you want to say? Again, it's sensitive material for obvious reasons, so I think I'll stop there. And then, of course, Patrick, the next meeting is Monday the 31st, because this Monday was spring break for a lot of people. That concludes my report.
Thanks, Polly. Any questions? Then we move on to item number 10, General Manager's Report, 10A, Financials. That's Norma.
Hey, wait a minute, you guys. Can I say one more thing?
Go
I thought this was kind of cool. So even though it's lower on the priority, for the first time, we are tossing around hydropower. And it is extremely rough and very, very preliminary. And Galita had presented this about maybe a year ago, not just verbally saying, hey, you guys might want to look at this because we're doing it, and there could be some opportunities to generate some hydropower. You never know. And so as it turns out, Joel said there could be some places in the infrastructure where it just might work. So I thought that was really cool. Sorry I didn't mention it before, but way down on the list of priorities, but early days, but looking into it.
I like it better than Edison Company. That sounds good.
Well, that's what we're thinking. Thank you.
No, great. Thank you. Norma?
Okay, water sales budget to actual through January. We are actually 106 acre feet above sales projections, and that's related to just an increase in ag sales through January. And through January, again, we're 58% through the year, and our water sales are right at 58.4%, and our operating expenses are just below that at 55%.
Any questions? Then we got, thank you, Norma. 10B, Bob, Engineering Report.
I'm going to ask if you have any questions on B, C, and D, if that's okay, and then I'll jump to the water supply report if you have none.
No, that's fine. So any questions for Bob on B, C, and D? If not, we move on to 10E, water supply report.
All right, whoops. So it's a familiar chart showing total surface water available, and you can see we're in very good shape compared to previous years. We have a significant amount of Kachuma carryover, as well as a full allocation of state water. Total well production is down because you may recall, we met our groundwater production goal a little bit early because we were concerned that we were concerned that we would have a spill, so we wanted to get the water, because when a spill happens, you stop pumping. So we wanted to get the water pumped before that event happened. Of course, it hasn't happened, but you have to kind of time it so that you're prepared when and if it does happen. So this is kind of a look at target sales versus actual sales, and you can kind of see the. I'm sorry, this is. I don't have my long distance glasses on. I apologize. This is the groundwater production map, and so again, I think as I mentioned here, we hit our target of 1,000 acre feet right there in December, and so now we've really been only turning the wells on just to exercise them and take samples as necessary. So it's going to be flat until June. Metered consumption. So this is month over month, and you can see we're up a little bit from last year. The weather has been a little bit different this year, so I think that's driving ag use a little bit more than last year. Also, we had significant snow over the last several weeks, which is pushing the snow accumulation closer to the average in all three regions of snowpack. So that's good news for the State Water Project. So this is kind of the statewide view of that. I don't know what that red line is, but this is kind of where we would expect to be on average. And so we're pretty close right in March there. Allocation, as you know, a few weeks ago, or you may know, it was raised to 35%. And then, of course, this is kind of the reason why our sales are up. Is it was relatively dry. The bars down below kind of show the rain. So we really got almost no rain up until February, and then we got all of the rain in February. So, and you can see the demand line kind of, these gray lines are kind of a dry year and a wet year. I'm sorry, a wet year and a dry year. And so you can kind of see we're straddling the wet year early, but then kind of go into the dry year as we get into the winter, and then really kind of exceed the dry year. But then when it really rains, we kind of come back down to the wet year. So yeah, this is again the consumption. And you can kind of see we're kind of right in between, the target line and the maximum line here. And so we expect we'll probably, as we head into the warmer months, we'll probably see this kind of stay in the middle. And we'll come in probably a little bit above our projected sales. This just breaks it down into M&I versus ag, and you can see the ag is really where it's followed the upper boundary and then actually exceeds the upper boundary here versus M&I, which is kind of following the lower boundary. So this is kind of just a water use over time, and again, kind of looking at the precipitation and how it affects the water demand. And so you can kind of see the winter comes here and it dips down and it rebounds. So this is statewide reservoirs. All the reservoirs are pretty full, so that's a good sign. So percent to date for rainfall in Carpinteria is at 51%, and 42% of the total year. So we're still below, quite a bit below as well at Kachuma in terms of rainfall. And there's likely to be a little bit more rain this year, but again, this is fairly, we're fairly behind the curve on rain. Kachuma is at 171 or 88% of total, or 89% of total volume. So Kachuma is in pretty good condition still. We don't expect any cutbacks with respect to that supply. So again, because we're, particularly in the southern area, low on rainfall, you can see that the drought monitor is starting to show that there are signs of a drought starting. And so we'll see what the rest of the year looks like. And then, of course, 1 year drought is something that we can easily handle. But if it continues, if it stacks on, then we'll start to see the state turn darker colors. So that's it for the water supply. If you have any questions.
Okay, then thank you, Bob. Then we'll go to the closed session items. Item 11A, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, titled General Manager. 11B, closed session item, conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, negotiator Bob McDonald, classification General Manager. Then closed session item number 11C, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9, D1, name of case, Central Coast Water Authority et al. Versus Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District et al. Case number 21 CV 02432. So we're going into closed session.
Recording stopped.
We're back in open session. Item number 11A, no reportable action. Item number 11B, no reportable action. Item number 11C, no reportable action. And then number 13, consider dates and items for the agenda for Carpinteria Valley Water District Board meeting of April 9, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. Carpinteria City Hall, 5775 Carpinteria Avenue, Carpinteria, California. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.